The theorist we are going to talk about today is Stephen Krashen. Krashen is a well-known linguist professor. Some of his greatest work are his 5 hypotheses on language acquisition. They are acquisition learning hypothesis, monitor hypothesis, natural order hypothesis, input hypothesis, and effective filter hypothesis. The first one we are going to talk about is acquisition learning hypothesis. This is based off the idea that there are 2 ways to learn language. Naturally, by interacting with the language. This is known as acquisition. And the second way is formal instruction or learning. According to Krashen, students learn more through acquisition than through drills and practice. Children learn their first language through acquisition, and this can be used to learn a second language as well. Teachers can use this idea to make sure students get authentic language practice in the classroom. This can be done through partner language practice such as numbered heads, busy bees, and think pair shares. I added the comic to the bottom because I think it was a funny way of looking at his acquisition learning hypothesis. It says, "Today we are going to acquire the English language. I thought we were learning." Actually, acquisition allows us to speak and understand the language, while learning only allows us to pass our exams. That's right, Fred. So let's start acquiring. The next hypothesis that we're going to talk about is monitor hypothesis. According to Krashen, the monitor hypothesis allows students to put together what they have learned through acquisition and explicit learning to monitor and produce quality output. In order for this to take place, students need to be able to do 3 things. They need to have time to process the information, they need to know grammar rules, and they need to be able to focus on correctness. Some ways teachers can do this in the classroom is by giving students wait time to process, setting up think pair shares, and giving students time to jot down their ideas on paper. Some students may not monitor enough, and other students may monitor too much and become hesitant to share. A student becomes an optimal user when they master the ability to monitor without it hindering their ability to communicate. One thing teachers can do is help students discover when it is appropriate to monitor and when it is not. I found this visual and I feel like it helped to explain the monitor hypothesis. The next hypothesis we're going to talk about is natural order hypothesis. This states that there is a predictable order that students learn grammatical structures, regardless of their first language, age, or background. According to Krashen, it is not possible to speed up the process of teaching students something they are not ready to comprehend. They must have foundational items to build on. As teachers, we need to know this process so that we do not overwhelm our students. I decided to put a visual of a stair step here because this natural order hypothesis kind of reminded me of a student climbing up the stairs. The bottom step is all those foundational skills that we must build, and then we just build on them level by level until they reach the top. The next hypothesis that we're going to talk about is input hypothesis. This states that when students are acquiring language, the input should be slightly above their current level. One can look at the model to get an idea of what this looks like. The learner is at a certain level, and in this visual, I. And the learner needs comprehensible input at I plus 1, this meaning just slightly above where they are. This means it's very important for teachers to know the language levels of their students so they can push them to the next level. The final of the 5 hypotheses is the effective filter hypothesis. This hypothesis incorporates all of the factors that can influence language acquisition. There are 3 main factors, and these are motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety. Students that are highly motivated with good self-confidence and low anxiety have an effective filter that can enable them to acquire more language skills than someone who lacks motivation, has high anxiety, or low self-esteem. It is important to lower the affective filter for our students so that they can feel that they have a safe place to practice and acquire language. This can be done using think, pair, shares and small groups to allow for comfortable communicating. Krashen had a couple of other hypotheses that we're going to talk about now. The first of these hypotheses was free voluntary reading. This is an idea that students should pick their own books to help motivate their reading and to do better on tests, develop vocabulary, and help with writing competence, and broaden general knowledge. This can be done at different times throughout the day. I like to incorporate some free reading into my reading block. This allows students to pick whatever book that they are interested in. I find that this also motivates students to be readers in the classroom. And Krashen believes that there should not be follow-up activities to this reading. It should truly be a time for students to take pleasure in their reading. The next theory that Krashen had was about cognitive development. So he theorized that problem solving helped with development. Krashen stated, learning is the result of working through complex problems, which most teachers would not argue. The final thing that Krashen talked about was writing competence. According to Krashen, writing competence and writing performance are both important for students to become successful writers. He believed competence happens through reading, as previously stated, and then practice. Teachers should teach students to read like writers. This means that students should look at what writers are doing effectively and then practice these skills that they have learned as well. Finally, I have found a video to kind of help solidify all of these ideas that we have talked about in our presentation. Thank you for taking the time to learn about Stephen Krashen. I hope you found this was helpful and you learned a lot.